Okay, we're now going to do a video on pouring silicone, mixing up the silicone and pouring it into the molds. We use Dragon Skin 10NV, a 2-part resin with parts A and parts B, as well as Wonder Fluid, which is a silicone thinner. So the steps involved in this, we basically use about 30 grams per mold of each material, and then just under 10% of Wonder Fluid in regards to the weight for one part of that. So we're going to do 5 molds, which means 150 grams of part A, followed with 12 grams of Wonder Fluid. Mix those two up, and then add another 150 grams of the Dragon Skin part B. After that, everything will go into the vacuum chamber for 3 minutes at minus 30 on the pressure, and then after that we have about 10 minutes of really functional pot life to get everything into the molds. Okay, so first we start with part A. We turn the scale on, wait for it to zero out. There you go, 0 grams, and then we pour this in. We were a little bit short with the first bottle, so fortunately we had a second bottle, so we were at 73 grams. Keep filling up, and like I said, we're trying to get to 150 on here. It doesn't have to be perfectly precise, but get as close as you can. So once you get into the 140 range, just start slowing down your pour a little bit more as you approach. And 150 there. So that's 150.53. We go ahead and put that back to 0 and add 12 grams of the Wonder Fluid for thinner. There we go, 12 grams on the nose. I've been doing this for a while. Now take that off, stir it up. So you're just stirring through, and this ends up creating a lot of bubbles, which is why we have to go through the vacuum process. There we go. Wipe off the edge. Put it back on the scale, zero out again. There we go. Okay, now 150 grams of part B. So now's when time becomes of the essence. As soon as the two start touching each other, you have a 15-minute pot life for everything. And we use 3 minutes of that for getting the bubbles out and 10 minutes of that for working. We've got a little bit of spare time here and there, really, that we use just for knowing that we're going to be off. And I was talking too much, put in 3 extra grams, but that shouldn't make a difference. So now we stir this up. Stir a little in the middle, a little around the edges, lift up and down, get it well mixed. And then wipe off the edges here. And from there, we put it into the vacuum chamber. And it's important, if you see the vacuum chamber, this is where the air actually goes in and out, so don't align the cup directly underneath that. Turn that on, right now this opens the valve to go in, this closes the valve, and now you can see the dial is moving right there. And we're gonna wait till it gets all the way to -30 and then turn it off. And what happens is it actually starts making the resin boil inside. So I'll give you a close-up view of that. There. And lovely trying to focus on it, but you get the point. So you can see the vacuum is starting to smoke. It's burning off some of the oil. You have to make sure that the vacuum has plenty of oil in it at any time, so check that periodically to make sure that the levels are not too low. And as we are approaching -30, there's a lot of bubbles in the cup. And as soon as we get there, then we're going to close this valve, which is what is pulling air into there, and then turn off the pump. So we are almost just a fraction away from it. And there we go, -30, turn off the pump. So I'm gonna go ahead and pause this and come back in a minute. So our 2 minutes are almost up. We have 45 seconds left, so I was just gonna go through. The syringe is the important part of this. We're going to fill up the syringe with 60 milliliters from inside of the cup each time. We're going to place that into here, and we're going to really slowly push that down. Usually right around 30 milliliters is when we start seeing the silicone come out of the mold. And when you're doing that, you're going to see some bubbles through that, and keep going as slow as you can until you've given about an extra 5 milliliters into the process. And then as you remove this, you keep applying pressure so that you fill up silicone all the way to the top of that hole. Then you'll refill and do the next one. Okay, so timer's up. Now we open this valve here, which lets the air in. And that is open. Now we can pull this out. And I always place this cup on a little bit of a tilt so that it's easier to get everything out of it. Push that down to 0 and then pull 60 milliliters into it. And it takes noticeable effort to do this. Okay, we're at 60, dab off the end, set that in there, and now usually I use 2 hands, but I'll try to do it with 1 so that you can see this better. There's a rough flow rate. And the problem here is if you go too fast, you're introducing a lot of bubbles into the system. Those will come up and get stuck into the nose bridge and basically mean that your gasket's not usable. So the gaskets can handle a couple of tiny bubbles here and there, but if you end up with too many bubbles in the system, they all collect at the highest point on the mold, which is on the nose bridge, which is also the most sensitive area for this entire gasket while the user is wearing it. So we're at 30 milliliters, so things should start coming out momentarily. And it really just depends on how many gaps are there. And there I can see it coming out of the vents. It's coming out of the vent on the back side completely. And it's starting to come out of the vent on the front side. You see it leaking through right there. And I don't see many air bubbles in that. So I'm just going to give it another milliliter or so, and then I'm going to start to work this out while I continue to push down. There you go. And so now you just refill and do the next one. And you'll probably be able to watch the first one drift down slowly. What's happening there is that the air bubbles are working through the system, and then they'll be coming up through the centerpiece here, which allows the level to drop further. So put that into the next one. So yeah, I can see on the first one, the level's already dropping down a bit. Approaching the 30 milliliter mark. And there you go. So we're actually getting about 35 milliliters in each one of these. Fill it up for the third one. I know from experience that this mold always causes a few problems for us. You begin to realize which ones can be finicky. Okay, so this one is just about full. We have 2 more to go after that. There you see coming out from the vents. And don't see any air bubbles coming through, which is a good sign. Might have done the pour slow enough where we have a good result. It's always a dance time-wise. The slower you go, the better results you get. But if you go too slow, you run out of working life on the resin. That's the main reason why I only do a maximum of 6 per pour. So if you try to do 12, you end up rushing and you get a poor quality on each one. But by doing it this way, I have 5 molds of the version 5 and then 6 molds of the version 6. And so I just work within those as my 2 constraints each time. Okay, and it's coming up. That time I went a little fast and I can see some air bubbles coming up through. So I'm gonna keep pushing in an extra milliliter or 2 just to make sure we don't have too many problems with it. And then pull that out. If you look, you can see that the first one I poured has drifted down about maybe ½ an inch. So I'm gonna just top off. I don't put the syringe all the way in. I just let it flow in from the side so that way it doesn't add extra air bubbles, and just top that off. So now we'll fill up for the last one. Now for this, I said 30 grams of each part just because it's a lot easier to do the calculation. If you want to try to dial it in, I think that number is really closer to 27 grams per. So I always end up with a little bit extra that you get the fun game of trying to decide what you'd like to use that for. So I've been casting different shapes of things around my house each go round. But ideally, it's better not to waste material if you can get that setting dialed in exactly. So here's the last one of the group. And we're 30 milliliters now. 34, and you can see it coming out. And no air bubbles here, so we're going to pull this out. And now one thing that you can do is run a space heater next to everything. It's a very temperature sensitive process, so the warmer it is, the faster things cure. So I have a heater right here that I'll turn on, and I'll let that run while I prep for the next 6.